Let's rock and roll! Lá onde eu moro, a gente vai assim, ó, hook 'em horns! É o grito de guerra dos alunos lá. Mas a Dana é de outra universidade, não entende esse. E aqui tem outro significado, né? No, I'm talking about Texas, about the rock and Hong Kong, yeah, Maryland. Ok, meu nome é Rosenthal Calmon Alves, eu sou professor na Universidade do Texas, tenho a honra, sou um grande admirador da Abraji. Nada me faz mais orgulhoso e feliz do que ver a Abraji como uma organização tão sólida, tão forte. Eu tuitei a semana passada ou retrasada que esse é um dos... do you have your headphone? You don't care about what I'm talking? No.
I thought you were going to speak in English.
No, I will later. But now, just the intro. I have to.
Okay.
Yeah, just the intro. But anyway,
Yes.
Então eu estava dizendo que eu tuitei na semana passada. Como é que foi, Toledo? Eu disse, vai começar o Congresso da Abraji. É uma das conferências de jornalismo do mundo. E eu vou, como quem me segue no Twitter sabe, que eu vou a um montão de conferências no mundo inteiro, literalmente. E realmente o que a gente viu aqui nesses dias foi absolutamente fantástico. E a gente tem realmente a honra hoje de receber Dana Priest, que é simplesmente uma das melhores repórteres investigativas dos Estados Unidos. Dana, como vocês sabem, é repórter investigativa do Washington Post. Ela ganhou 2 prêmios Pulitzer. Ela fez muitas coberturas super importantes destas que mudam a história. Os 2 prêmios Pulitzer que ela... Bom, antes de eu dizer isso tudo, é interessante que ela começou no jornalismo. Ela hoje é professora de jornalismo, tem na Universidade de Maryland a mesma cátedra que eu tenho na Universidade do Texas, assim, que somos colegas como professores, mas ela nunca foi à escola de jornalismo, à faculdade de jornalismo, ao contrário de mim, que me formei na Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. Ela estudou humanas, liberal arts na Califórnia. Depois ela foi para Nova York e começou a fazer um curso de relações internacionais lá. Como ela estava fazendo um curso de relações internacionais, ela foi para o Washington Post no verão fazer um estágio na editoria internacional do Washington Post. E aí ela foi completamente contaminada por esse vírus maravilhoso que contamina todos nós aqui, que é o vírus do jornalismo, do amor pelo jornalismo, da paixão pelo jornalismo. E então ela tentou ficar no Washington Post. O Washington Post disse: não, vai aprender jornalismo aí em algum lugar. Aí ela saiu, foi trabalhar em outros lugares, mas um ano depois eles a chamaram de volta e ela começou a carreira dela no Washington Post. É uma carreira marcada pelo jornalismo investigativo. O Washington Post botou ela para fazer beat reporting, que é reportagem de setor, né? Ela cobriu, por exemplo, no governo esse Clinton, a história da reforma da saúde e tal, e ela diz que foi bom porque ali ela aprendeu um pouco como que a máquina burocrática funciona. Mas depois ela começou a fazer a cobertura mais importante da carreira dela, foi a cobertura da área militar e da área de segurança nacional. Os 2 prêmios Pulitzer que ela ganhou, o primeiro foi, ela descobriu o grande segredo da atuação da CIA no período pós-11 de setembro, que foram as prisões secretas em várias partes do mundo onde o governo americano praticava maiores barbaridades no que eles chamam de interrogatório estendido, enhanced interrogation, que a palavra certa é tortura. Depois ela fez uma outra matéria que ganhou outro prêmio Pulitzer, que foi também uma matéria que teve uma repercussão enorme no país, que foi a maneira como os veteranos de guerra eram cuidados no hospital Walter Reed, que é o principal hospital militar que estava recebendo os feridos de guerra. Essas guerras desse século, uma das coisas mais importantes dela é que teve muitos sobreviventes, muito mais do que nas outras guerras, porque a medicina de guerra melhorou muito. Então, os Estados Unidos receberam muitos soldados mutilados, muita gente, e ela fez uma reportagem espetacular nisso. Depois, a terceira, que eu acho que devia ter ganho um prêmio Pulitzer, mas não ganhou, foi a Secret America.
Top Secret.
Top Secret America, mais do que Secret. Top Secret America, onde uma investigação, eu me lembro lendo isso e falei, meu Deus, que coisa impressionante. Ela descobriu toda a rede de novas instalações do serviço da espionagem americana por todo o país. Uma coisa ela vai mostrar aqui. Então, vocês não vieram aqui para me ouvir, vocês vieram aqui para ouvi-la. Então, sem mais delongas, no further ado, Dana Priest.
Well, first I wanted to thank Rosenthal because he invited me here, and I've never been to Brazil before. I always wanted to come, and I don't speak Portuguese, which I'm very sad about. But I have sat in on some of the sessions, and I have to say they're so impressive. This is a great organization, and so I congratulate the people who put it on. To bring people from all over the place, including Charlie Hebdo. That was fascinating. So I learned a lot, and I've made some good contacts with other professors and other journalists. And Brazil seems to be a very exciting place right now for journalists. So I'm very happy to be here. I have 3 machines. They gave me 3 machines to use, so I hope I can do it correctly. I don't need the translation. Okay, right. Okay. Well, I just decided that I would talk about the last story that Rosenthal just talked about called Top Secret America. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about how it came about because one of the reasons why I'm teaching now is because I think that so many young journalists have gotten seduced by technology, but they don't know enough about how to build sources, how to get people who know secrets to talk to them, and how to look around where they are and find the good stories. So I want to talk to you about this one because it's a combination of using the internet and websites with people who helped me and my colleague who put a lot of this together. And this story came about because, like you were saying, I covered the Pentagon for many years and I covered the CIA for many years as a beat reporter. So every day I had to figure out what was going on. And I lived in Washington I've been in Washington for 30 years with my family. I have a husband and 2 kids. And after 9/11, my job was to try to figure out how the United States was fighting the war against Al Qaeda. And it was a very difficult assignment because George Bush decided at the time that, and we didn't know this, that the CIA should be in charge of this war. And the CIA is a secret organization that we are not supposed to know anything about. So it was a difficult assignment to begin with. What kind of war are they carrying out? What are the weapons? What are the tactics? What are they doing? Is it helping? Is it creating more problems? All these things. And that's part of how I found out about the black sites after years of doing this sort of reporting. But while I was doing this reporting, everywhere I went and every person that I talked to in the Pentagon, military, State Department, sometimes the CIA or other intelligence agencies, I noticed that they would always tell me about new organizations, new agencies, new military units. There was always something new that was being created that I had not heard about before. And after a while, I just thought this is growing. And at the same time, physically, I could drive around Washington out into the suburbs and I could see that the skyline was changing. That it used to be in Washington before 9/11 that the tallest buildings in the near suburbs would have the names of big defense contractors and big insurance companies and big financial institutions. Well, we have the Pentagon, so that makes sense. And there's a lot of people to insure, so that made sense. But after 9/11, the names on the big buildings changed. And there were more big buildings that were created. And they had names that told you nothing about what was inside. Names like L3 or SAIC. Just who knew? A big mystery. And so I see that the skyline is changing, and people in the Pentagon and the national security agencies are telling me about all sorts of new organizations. So I would ask them about these new organizations, and they would complain that all of a sudden, after 9/11, if you said that you did counterterrorism in the bureaucracy, you could get a lot of money from Congress to do it. Because after 9/11, Congress was so worried, and they gave the national security agencies more money than they even asked for. Something like $300 billion the first year and the second year. So by the time, by 2000, 10 years after 9/11, or 8 years after 9/11, I was convinced that this something big was happening, especially in Washington, but probably in other places, that was the result of the spending that happened within the government after 9/11. And and all of my sources were telling me that this big new intelligence military complex was growing up. And I know enough about bureaucracy to know that once it starts to grow, it never shrinks, especially if it's in the military or the classified secret area where you and me, we cannot see whether it's effective or not. So at some point, I decided that I would like to try to document this. How, I want to try to figure out how to explain how big this has gotten to the public. And how do you do that? Well, working with my partner, his name is Bill Arkin, we had a lot of people helping us, giving us the names of organizations, the names of people, this sort of thing. And then we came upon other methods that I'll show you later how to do, that you could use the web and find a lot of organizations and buildings in Washington. You could find their address, and once you found one building, we discovered that many of the buildings were clustered together. And then we discovered that they were often clustered together near one of the big intelligence agencies. So we have 13 different intelligence agencies in the government, and each of them have many different, they have a headquarters that's in the Washington area, but then they have satellite organizations that you can find. They're not that secret. You can find them. And we discovered that wherever there's a headquarters or a satellite organization, there are many, 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 many companies, contractors that grew up around these headquarters. So I knew by then that one of the things that the government decided was we will spend much more money trying to find the terrorists, but we won't grow government because that's not politically acceptable. Well, how do you do that? How do you grow the infrastructure that is supposed to help you find terrorists without growing the government? And the answer is you hire private contractors. So these private contractors that were small organizations before this, they grew very large. So the new buildings that were surrounding Washington are these new contractors, private for-profit companies who are getting millions and millions of dollars to do work that's secret, that requires a what we call a clearance. I don't know if there's a word, but a special authority to work in them, and that the public could not see any of these contracts because they were classified. So we used our different methods to build a map. We sort of thought of it as like the human genome project. We were mapping the DNA of an alternative geography of the United States. And really, it was so big that you could put it on a map and you could see the alternative geography come alive. In the end, we discovered that there were 1,200 government agencies that worked on counterterrorism alone, 1,200, that had grown up after 9/11, and that there were 2,000 contracting companies that were working for those agencies. And they do work that is not just secret, but it's top secret. So there's a hierarchy of secrets. And secret was too big to try to map because millions of people in the military, everybody has a secret clearance, and many organizations do secret. It was too big to try to capture, so we went to the next level. Top secret is really supposed to be something that people never learn about. And we also counted the number of people with top secret clearances, and there were more than 1 million. So when we did our map, and I want to show you, it's not very clear here, but this is an intensity map. So the big red circle and the blue is the most, where most of them are. And then you have throughout the country. Now, why in Atlanta? In Georgia, which is that circle right below the big circle, that is a NSA substation, it's called. So a satellite headquarters, and all of these contractors are focused around there. These are all of we looked at not just the federal government counterterrorism projects, but the state and local level. And these are all the new state and local level counterterrorism places that that now spend money to try to keep us safe. Here is an example of 33 of the largest new buildings in the Washington area. If you go on our website, you can see it's much clearer, and it's very fun to. This is one of my favorites because each of these buildings is gigantic, and it's new, and all of them do different things. And the dots in the middle show you where they're located. And we would go visit them all. We would go on the outside and visit them. And our photographer, who had to take all the pictures, he would go also on the outside and try to get photos of these places before the police there would, catch him. So if you have all these new organizations and this new growth, how is it going to be organized? And who's going to make sure that not everyone is doing the same thing? So, of course, the government created another organization to put on top of that to monitor all of that, which is called the Director of National Intelligence. Well, the Director of National Intelligence started out as a very small organization, and then it grew and it grew and it grew. And now it's this big. It is, do you know Walmart, the store? This is like stacking 4 Walmarts on top of each other. It's that big. And when I had some interviews in there to do this story, and when I would park in the parking lot, because the number of people inside is secret, so they wouldn't tell me. So when I would come about 15 minutes early, park in the parking lot, and then I would actually drive around the parking lot in my car and count the number of parking spaces to give me some sense of how big it was. And their cameras never decided, what is she doing driving around the parking lot? But this is now a gigantic thing, and outside it doesn't have a sign that says Director of National Intelligence. It doesn't tell you what it is. So this is a map of all the agencies that these are the command centers. So if you're an organization that does counterterrorism, you have to have a command center to be important. So we wanted to map all the command centers and then create a line of authority to explain them all. This is such a crazy map. And this is a picture of the capital of Top Secret America, which is not in Washington, D.C. It's at Fort Meade, which is 50 miles north of Washington, at the NSA. So this is the building, you all know the NSA now. And today, my friend from Publica has broken another story about WikiLeaks and NSA spying. So you have to go on that too. But this is the NSA building. We call it the capital of Top Secret America because it has the largest budget in the intelligence world. And also we know that it's doubled in size after 9/11. And we know that because I got if you want to build more parking spaces in this county where it's located in the city, you have to apply for an environmental permit. So even the NSA has to apply for an environmental permit. And we found the environmental permit at the city. And in the permit, it talks about their expansion because they have to get the permit for the parking places. So we found out things they wouldn't tell us. They filed in the city to get the permit to build the parking places. And this is just a picture. Yeah, that's just a picture of it at night because they never sleep. So one of the other things that I wanted to do is to go over on the computer for a minute and show you one of our big secret methods that you can use now too. So all of these things are supposed to be, okay. How do I get the browser? Okay. So all of these things are classified and they should be very difficult to find, but if you are a contractor and you need to hire someone with a special skill who has a security clearance, you have to figure out a way to let them know that there's a job. So we found this very secret website called monster.com. And we found that if you go to the search engine, and you can do this now, and you type in top secret, and you push go. Are we going? Oh, search. Okay, right. Okay, now watch what happens. These are all the current positions that require a top secret clearance. And some of them have changed just from last night when I did this. I will show you this here. Wait, hold on. There's one. Let's see. Let's go to let's go here. So if you go into the job description, you'll find all these programs that are probably secret programs, and you can type them into the website again, and they will help you figure out other things. So we use this to find the code words of many programs that we didn't know about before. There's one here that one other one that I want to show you. Let's try. This is another one of those funny companies. It's called CSC. Who knows what that means? So this is them, and this is what they want. And let's see if they use any code names. Well, here they're working for the Border Patrol Agency, that's CPB, for the Immigration Service, and for the Department of Homeland Security. So all those agencies also have top secret programs. Okay, so I think that if you want to have some fun, you can look in here and you could put maybe Brazil, or put Sao Paulo and see if under top secret and location, there might be something here. No, really, they're all over the world. It's crazy how much information. The other secret source is LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn and you want to find somebody who used to be in the SEAL Team 6, you know, the team that killed bin Laden, and it's a clandestine unit. Nobody's supposed to know anything about it. Its name really is the Naval Special Warfare Development. And if you put that in, you could see people on LinkedIn who used to be in that, or put in CIA. And you'll find people on LinkedIn who used to be in the CIA, or who might even now be in the CIA. And then if you look over to the side of their profile, you'll see a lot of their friends. It's very fun. It's very fun. Okay, one more thing, and then we're gonna. I know what makes me very excited about the future is that young people are learning technology and interactivity in a way that I never learned it. And I don't really want to learn it right now because there's so many better people doing that. But if you combine the technology with good, hard, investigative, human source building skills, you can do so many great things. So the Washington Post recently has been writing a lot about police shootings. I know you heard of Ferguson and other places. So the police do not keep their own database. There's no national database of police shootings. So the Washington Post just created one. And it did it by mainly searching other newspapers, because there's no really good way to do it. And they created this interactive website that I just wanted to show you because it's very cool. And so if you go to, well, here are the months, and you go to the details of the shootings, it will take you to another page, and you can filter. So in the first 6 months, there have been 466 shootings by police. Now let's look at the map. The map is very interesting. You may have heard that in Arizona, we have a crazy sheriff who is very anti-immigrant. And my guess is that a lot of those shootings are concentrated around his the Phoenix area because he probably doesn't discourage violence in the, so you can see that. But then here's a timeline. And then here are the, individual cases. And there's one other one. Click here to explore the data. There. It, breaks it down. Female, male. Here are all the African American deaths. And then you can go on any particular one and get the statistics about that. The other thing that's new about this is in the past, like when we did Top Secret America, we had to fact check every single dot on the map ourselves with our team. We had a team of people that was helping us. They are under pressure to be so fast that they could not fact check all of these things, and they say that. They say this is a living database. And we get it out of the newspapers online and in Google, but there might be mistakes in it. This is something we never would have done before. We never would put something up that we didn't check. Now, because there's so much pressure to be quick with the stories, they are putting it up and they're asking the public. We're crowdsourcing the facts. If there are new facts, call us. And they give you a place where you can write in. So I think that's what I wanted to say for an opening. And now I'm going to be interrogated by
I'm going to use enhanced techniques. Well, I think this is great. We're going to talk a little bit about how Jeff Bezos' arrival, impact on the newsroom, etc. But before, let's talk a little bit more about investigative journalism techniques and about the two stories. I mean, first, I know that your experience in the military kind of illuminated how you would cover the war on terror, right? I mean, war on terror was completely different. How did you come? Because you were in the invasion of Panama, you were in operations all over. You know how I know about you. You in very other in many other international operations of the military. How did you, as a bit reporter, expert in the military coverage, saw when the war on terror started? Because how to cover it? Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
So remember it was all secret, and the CIA was the main lead agency, which meant the military was really mad because they wanted to be the main lead agency. So as a reporter who understands the jealousies between the bureaucracies, you should know that that is the best source of information. When I started to cover the military, I thought it was all one organization. No. The Army hates the Air Force hates the Marines hates the Navy, and they all make it their business to know everything the other service is doing and how much money they're getting, because they're all rivals in a way. Well, so you find the person in the Air Force who knows what's happening in the Army, and they will probably tell you some about it. The same was happening when the CIA got the job to go first into Afghanistan with the special forces. And also, the military hates the special forces. They did. Because they hate the fact it's a small unit that thinks it's better than all other units. So the other units know that, and they don't like that. So in the beginning, you could get some information, not a lot, because the agency, the CIA, is very, closed, and not a lot of people know what's happening. But some people who were in the rival organizations or the rival State Department, the State Department was cut out of a lot of this, and yet they have the job of dealing diplomatically with all the countries. So there were many different bureaucratic cracks that you could exploit to get information.
So the black sites, the secret prison, what do you call the little, what do you call the little prisoner system of the CIA?
Yeah.
How did you discover that? Because you were a beat reporter, you did not stop writing stories, and it took more than 2 years for you to do that, because it was not only a secret, but there were some rumors about that. How how did you come to the realization that the rumors, because you probably heard rumors first, the rumors that the CIA was having prisons, and also the rendition, the famous
Right.
rendition. How did you build that on top of your day to day? Because I can't imagine you stopped working and did 2.5 years only on the.
Right. The best way to do investigative reporting, I think, is to have a beat, is to have your job every day. You have to cover the police in Sao Paulo or the military or the Air Force, just so every day you know a lot of people, you're doing the news, but because you're with these people all the time, you're hearing things. So what I always did as a reporter, even when I was a Metro reporter, is I would have what I call two tracks. One track is the daily stories, and the other is to pick one subject or two subjects that you're interested in and be following those up, because investigations, they take a long time, and sometimes there's a lot of waiting for answers or waiting for sources. And so you actually, it's hard to do this all the time full time, because there's sometimes waiting time. So you have two tracks, and that's really how that worked. At that time, I was a daily reporter on the intelligence world. So the CIA, the NSA, and all the other 17 intelligence agencies. And, that's good because you get your name in the paper and people see you're covering it. And I would go to events that I could speak at, so that if there were any intelligence people, sometimes they would come up afterwards, just looking for every chance I could to be near the intelligence people. And one of the good things that I think might happen here with the military is when they have to testify in Congress, always go, because they just line up to testify. They are sitting like you are, and they're testifying here, and they're all just sitting there. And then the senators, and they have to go vote during the testimony, and they get up, and then the people who are witnesses, they don't have anything to do. So you come up and you talk to them, every chance I could get to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody who was difficult to reach. Cocktail parties, embassy parties, all sorts of things. It's exactly what the CIA does, by the way. Um, so just any opportunity. And the secret prisons really did take about 2 years. And in the beginning, it was one little story about, I would hear that, here's one story that I thought maybe I was going crazy about this story, because it was one man that I heard, he was Afghan, and he was killed because somebody left him. He was being interrogated. They left him outside overnight in the winter with no clothes on, and he was chained to the floor, and he died. And I knew just a little bit about this story, and it took me 6 months to get enough detail to write it. And during that time, I thought, I don't even know his name. I don't know the name of the CIA officer involved, but it just felt like this is the most voiceless person in the world. And to me, that's what we always do. So I did that story. I did another story about the special operations that had a special place on the Bagram airfield in Afghanistan. There would be times when, in the very beginning, we would say, where are the Al Qaeda leaders that they're capturing? Where are they taking them? You ask the military, they say, we don't have them. Okay, the FBI doesn't have them. Where are they? So basic questions like that led us to asking, where are these people? And then you would get people who would hint at the fact that they are in the CIA's hands. Well, where? Did they bring them to the United States? Did they put them on a ship? Guantanamo? These things, you keep asking, those questions, and you exploit these divisions, and you know how to handle a source on sensitive topics. Little by little, you can get enough details. There was no Edward Snowden with a bunch of documents. That is, I know that many young people here might think that this is the way journalism happens, but it's not. This is an anomaly. We have never had anything like that, and we might have it again, but that's not really how I ever worked.
So one thing that is important in the two-track strategy is that because there are lots of beat reporters here, and they would say that they are totally suffocated by their bosses for doing 3 stories per day, whatever, that they were maybe wondering, there is no way I can have a second thing. Others do that because this is a kind of a normal thing. But in your case, there were moments that you may have been attempted to publish, because when did you decide that the story was ready to go in terms of critical mass? Because in these 2 years, in the end of the first year, you already knew a lot that those things existed. How do you decide that?
Well, in the realm of intelligence, we can never quote anybody because they won't allow us to quote them. So we have to get enough detail so that you, the reader, will believe my story. Because if I'm not quoting people, why should you believe my story? So it's really getting enough detail anyway that the story will sound credible. But it's still very difficult. And my main strategy for having the 2 tracks is not to tell my editor about the second track until I have done enough work so I know the story is there. Because a lot of investigative work is you think there's a story, you have to do a lot of work before you really know that there's a deep story worth telling. So I would do that like at night. And then at a certain point, I would tell my editor, and there's an old saying that a great story trumps a mediocre story. So if you have a great story that you really have evidence is true, your editor is probably by that time going to let you work on it.
Yeah. The other thing is when you're dealing with such a sensitive issue uh, of national security, that people, there. I probably have some neighbors in Texas that think that you are a betrayer,
Yes.
you are a horrible person. Because, but you also have some respect to the government and the authorities. So sometimes people are very surprising to know that you, in that case, has to call the government, call the CIA, and say,
Right.
how how do you do that? And I know that in this case there were some negotiations and some things that you did not publish, right? Can you explain this process a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think after all this time that there are some secrets that should never be revealed. And I also know that even when I find something out, the context and the ramifications of what I found out might not be clear to me and could possibly put people in danger. So when we find out something like this that is classified, we have a process at the post that we follow, which is that we call. So I'll tell you about the secret prisons. In that case, I called up the CIA and I said, we're going to write a story and it will say the following. And I don't read them the story, but I tell them the basic information in the story. And I say, would you like to comment? And they say, no, but we will get back to you. And that means that they are going to take that information and they're going to go up the chain. And in this case, that's what happened. They went up the chain to the CIA director who called in my editors and me and tried to persuade us that these countries would be in jeopardy if you named them, and the program would probably have to close. And they said it was very valuable. It got a lot of good intelligence, all the stuff that they have continually said. And our editors would come back, and then we would debate. We would debate. Could they be right? Where are they not right? What do we owe the public? And in this case, it went then up to the White House, and George Bush called in my editors, and I didn't get to go to that meeting. But in every case, the editors are saying it's not a negotiation. We have all the control because we don't have prior censorship in the United States. So we could publish everything. But in that case, my editor decided, the big editor of the paper, that we shouldn't publish the names of the countries because it sounded to him like a reasonable case that those countries might be under threat if they publish those names. But what happened, so we didn't. We said they were in Eastern Europe because they were all in Eastern Europe. And what happened after that is
democracies.
Eastern European democracies, yes, which was very important to me because those were the countries with very strong independent intelligence agencies that we were trying to weaken after the fall of the Soviet Union. And yet during this now, we're cutting deals with those same intelligence agencies. But we didn't name them. But after the stories came out, Europe, in the United States, there was a lot of reaction. Most of it was negative about the Washington Post and me. Most of it said, I'm a traitor and the Washington Post is, a traitor. And it's terrible. That's mainly what the reaction was. There were some human rights groups and a couple other people, that would write in, but we got threats, we got a lot of anger. But Europe, they went crazy. And all the Council of Europe required all the countries to have independent investigations. So most of those were fake investigations because the intelligence agencies didn't want to do this work. So 10 years after the initial stories were written, well, 8 years after the stories were written, I can say that the countries themselves did investigations, or journalists in those countries found out that those prisons were in Poland, in Romania, and in Lithuania. And those were the countries that we couldn't name. And so journalists followed up and politicians followed up, and so now we know.
And moving to the other story, to the Walter Reed, that was a different repercussion, right? And how did you get to that story? What is the initial tip, and how long it was for you to put them
The
together?
Walter Reed story is more of a typical local story. Walter Reed, the Army hospital, the most famous Army hospital, is in Washington, D.C. And it has a big campus like a college. And there's a hospital, but then there are outpatients. Once you get your surgery, then you go and you stay in one of the dorms and you recuperate, and your family member can come and be your nurse, sort of. So because George Bush thought the war would be over soon in Iraq, but it wasn't, they had many more wounded people coming to the hospital. So the hospital grounds were full of soldiers who were being cared for in outpatient, and then their families. One friend of mine called me up one day and said, I have a friend who volunteers at Walter Reed who has heard some things from some of the wives that is really bad. Would you listen to her? So I had an interview with her, and she gave me one name of one person, a wife of a soldier inside, and I called that person. She gave me another name, another name. It was a very typical investigation. At some point, we decided I did this with a partner. We could go up to Walter Reed because you could get in if you showed your license and just said you were visiting somebody. So we would dress like very casually, and we went up, and there were a lot of civilians, the family members of the soldiers there, so we sort of just fit in. And we had one legal red line, which was we couldn't lie to anybody about who we were. So that meant for us that we had to make sure that nobody in authority ever said, "Oh, who are you?" So whenever we would see an officer come in the room or come near us, we would just leave. And we met many families, and we would take them maybe off the campus and have lunch and interview them at dinner and go into their rooms and talk to them. So it was kind of a stealth operation, but it's very people oriented, and there weren't documents. There were just people who told us their stories, and we got enough of those stories that we could figure out. And then we got some sources in the hospital itself who were willing to talk to us because the situation was so bad.
So, uh, messing around with all the secret, super secret, top secret services and issues in the United States, have you had any problem or felt threatened or some had to take some security measure or whatever? You felt in danger at any time?
Uh, there was one time when I was just a little worried, and that was shortly after the stories came out. There was a news conference called by the head of the Senate and the head of the House of Representatives, and they said, we should have an investigation of the Washington Post. And so at that time, because my phone number is in the phone book, we got a lot of harassing calls. But I want to make this point. In the United States, journalists are not in danger. That is one of the reasons I'm so happy to be in Brazil, because here is where so many people do very brave work. And one of the things I'm doing as a college professor is
I was going to that.
oh, you're going to,
You
okay,
can
go
go
ahead. Ask my
directly.
question. And one of the things my students, I'm teaching them intermediate reporting. The way I'm doing it is I give each student the name of a journalist who's in prison overseas somewhere. So, uh, Mexico, there was one, Iran, Azerbaijan, so many countries, Bahrain, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and they have to do reporting on this person in prison. It's to, and I help them figure out how, but it's to make the point to them that people overseas, like the five journalists who've been killed here in the last 2 years, 1.5 years, are willing to risk their lives to do basic journalism. And I want my students to know that, because if they want to be a good journalist, they are joining a group of people in the world who take this very seriously. And so they should take it very seriously. And when they study the sacrifices and the courage of journalists who are in prison and still want to practice journalism, it's very inspiring to them. So I would encourage you to also. Oh, and then my students were so impressed by the journalists and their courage that we did a Indiegogo crowdsourcing campaign. We raised $30,000 to produce. This is a bracelet with the names of 9 journalists who are in prison, and we sell these now for $10. And we give the money to the Committee to Protect Journalists, who has rescued some Brazilian journalists who were under threat and brought them, maybe for a while overseas till the problems die down. Um, but when we were talking about the journalism problem here, um, I have noticed that there aren't a lot of the big newspapers who are covering the problems of the killing of journalists in the rural areas. And
Yeah, because most are out of the big cities and are in
that's
it's
also
almost like another country. But yeah, I mean, we should have
all the better.
been indignant.
I mean,
Yes, and
they're
investigate.
great stories just
Yes,
by
absolutely.
themselves.
So let's move back to Washington Post and talk a little bit about the Jeff Bezos. I mean, how has been the impact in the newsroom or for you or
Yep.
for
Well, when Bezos, it was a complete surprise that the Graham family, who have owned the paper for so long and are such great owners, sold it. Nobody had any rumor. And then Jeff Bezos, Amazon, what in the world could this mean? um, the only reason I wasn't that worried was because Don Graham, the owner, was a friend of Bezos, and I really didn't think that he would sell it to somebody who would destroy it. And he hasn't. Jeff Bezos has turned out to be an owner that has, for now, put a lot of money into the paper. He doesn't he doesn't touch any of the content. He's not involved in any of the content. But he's used the business side of his brain to say, well, how do I make this successful business wise? And I'm glad that he's doing it because for a long time they're asking journalists to try to figure out how our journalism is to make money. I don't know. And I shouldn't even have to think about that because then I might change my direction. Maybe then I'll start writing stories that are pro business or something. That's not my role. So I'm glad that there's more of the, a bigger business team, a bigger technology team. We have now stopped firing journalists. We don't say we fire them, they say they lay them off or they give them retirement packages. They've stopped doing that and they're hiring. So they've hired at least 100 new people. Most of those people are technologists of things I can't even tell you what. They're interactive, they're new platforms, they're video, and some of them are reporters, real reporters. And so that's great. There are some beats that are becoming larger, and Bezos, who has never lived in Washington and still doesn't live in Washington, he now says we are to become a bigger international and national paper. And I know enough about business to know we're still going to sell the newspaper locally, so we'll remain also a local paper. So that's all good.
okay. There are two more questions from me, very brief. But if you want to ask questions to her, please write them up and give to the wonderful ladies and gentlemen who will pick them up. Well, I mean, one thing is that um, should I ask that question?
Yes.
Okay.
Whatever it is.
Why you have never used the word torture in your stories of the secret prisons?
Oh, okay, that's a hard one.
You said I shouldn't ask, so
Well,